Nearly every day I have to drive past this decrepit, long-abandoned house that my girlfriend and I have nicknamed the Centerville House because, well, that's the road it sits off of. The house is old, like seriously old. We've done a lot of digging because we were fascinated by it, and most of the real estate reports say that it was built in the late 1800s. We've been there a few times, and I've been there with a couple of my friends, but I never told her about it because we decided that it was our secret little adventure. It's such a chilling place with shattered windows, a car in the back that was busted up with some breeze blocks that we found lying around, and the creepiest part is this hanging baby mobile that plays some tinker lullaby after winding it up. Stereotypical haunted house stuff, almost as if the place was staged. Right around the side of this house is a gated-in cemetery that's all grown over with weeds and brush, with 3 different headstones of children who have died before the age of 10. None of this added up, and like I said before, we'd done what research that we were capable of and tried to piece together a story. There were a few reports of the land of which the house was built on, but the most detailed was an agricultural study to assure that there were no pollutants seeping into the watershed. But there were aspects that didn't make any sense. For example, the study had been constructed in 2008, but the person who had come to survey the land had reported that there were no structures that had been built on the property. Not only that, but the head groundskeeper, who had been tending to the land for over a decade, refuses to answer any questions about the farm. The original purpose of the 100 acres of the land which the house had been built on was for a fertilizer company. Real estate reports say that the land has been passed down every couple of years, beginning hardly 20 years after the house's construction, and the original owner can be found in the very cemetery which borders the Centerville House. The garage on the side of the house mimics nearly every aspect of the house, in a sense that it appears to have been both assembled and abandoned very haphazardly and quickly. Saw blades jammed halfway into rotting planks of wood, and shattered glass littering the lines of electronics, which I assume were to be repaired. The entire interior and exterior of the house gives you this impression that whoever lived in it last picked up everything and fled. All of this, though, is irrelevant, for regardless of the history of the house, the events in which unfolded a few nights ago is enough to warrant an indescribable chill which crawls along my spine at the very mention of this place. As I've said before, we've visited the house on multiple occasions. It's no secret in our school that this place exists, and I've heard stories from friends of mine who have gone to the house and everyone reports something ridiculous and untrue about what they've seen. Some kid continues to talk about how some old man came from the woods behind the house and chased him back to his car. Another group talks about how they turned the corner to find a lynched body which vanished when they came back with help. None of that had happened with us, but I always felt uncomfortable when I was inside the house. Like there was some part of me that knew I was trespassing on some cruel history. It was another night with my girlfriend. We had been out with a couple of friends from her neighborhood drinking, and she said she was walking the distance from her house, so I was convinced to make the mistake of driving home. She protested, but we weren't far from my house. All I had to do was turn down Centerville and drive until I reached my neighborhood. I was cruising down the road, music playing quietly in the background so I could concentrate, when I came close to the house. It's situated between 2 of the very sparse streetlights on the road, and since it was far from inhabited, it sits in total darkness every night. Well, my inhibitions were dimmed, so I listened to whatever it was inside me that told me to stare towards the house as I passed. I squinted into the darkness, straining for some evidence of ghastly demons, long before the crunch of a body slamming into my hood brought me back to reality. The pale figure smashed onto my windshield and rolled over to the roof of my car as the wheels screeched, and I bounded over the low curb in front of the house. It took me a few moments to catch my bearings and realize what had happened. My front windshield was cracked entirely, but Somehow it was still intact, but my roof was completely pummeled in. Crimson smears ran all over the front of my car, and rancid drops of blood dripped through the cracks and onto the dashboard. I kept a flashlight in my center console, so I reached in, flicked it on, and pulled myself out of the car. Lying there, draped over the curb, was a blanched body with its torn skin pulled tightly over its thin frame. I restrained myself from vomiting as its hind legs spasmed and the spine rolled in convulsion. The patchy hair over its skull draped over the face, but I could see red vomit dribble from its lips as I approached. Amidst the rattles of his bones and withering on the cold concrete, I stood slack-jawed and terrified. There was immediate sympathy and guilt, but an overwhelming sense that I had done a service began to creep onto me. What was left of this face that had been grounded along the asphalt turned towards me, sputtering specks of putrid blood, gasping for air between gulps of gore, and raised a bony claw to block its beady eyes from the light. I reached with my other hand and smacked the claw away and, without thought, brought my foot up and let it fall with all that I could muster. The skull was thin, and after a short pummeling, the legs were hardly twitching, and the howls of pain had stopped. I stood for a few moments with my light shining down on the pulp which ran up my leg and the twisted corpse at my feet. My light darted back up to the house, which was a mere 100 feet from where I was, and then I saw another ghoul ducked into the darkness, and the front doors swung back and forth, long missing latches to match the rusty hinges. I burned the clothes that I wore that night, and said that the damage done to my car had happened while it was parked. After hosing and scrubbing off the carnage from the front, there was no evidence to prove me otherwise. There were no police reports that I could find, which led me to believe that whatever I had slain was not something they could explain either. I still get fucking goosebumps when I drive past this place, and the stench of that body may never leave my dreams. Whatever you do, don't go to the Centerville House.